So in this video, I want to discuss the Young Eagles program. The Young Eagles program is a program by the Experimental Aircraft Association that introduces young people to aviation through flights in private airplanes. And so I decided to take a 13-year-old young man in my Beechcraft Baron 55. So the Young Eagles program aims to inspire young people about potential careers and educate them about aviation. So we decided to fly from Camarillo to Santa Maria. And so first, to plan this flight, we looked up the terminal en route control routes, which are called tech routes, to find if there's a tech route between Camarillo and Santa Maria. Tech routes are predefined routes that are designed to facilitate movement of aircraft between major airports in busy metroplexes. And these routes typically are used in the terminal airspace to streamline the air traffic and help controllers manage the flow of aircraft more efficiently. Tech routes are often used during the peak traffic times, and it can be very useful when you're filing your IFR flight plan to avoid a reroute and avoid congestion and delays. And as a pilot, we work closely with air traffic control. Air traffic control is a federal service. People who work for air traffic control are federal employees that provide ground-based controllers to manage and safely provide separation services between aircraft. And so the ATC communicates with pilots, and they provide us with instructions on headings, routes, different procedures, altitude changes, and sequencing, especially during takeoff and landing, but sometimes during the cruise phase as well. The primary goal of the ATC is just to provide separation, prevent mid-air collisions, between aircraft, and ensure efficient and safe airflow. Air traffic control is crucial in managing our airspace. Around Camarillo, the first air traffic control that you talk to is ground, and they provide you your clearance and your taxi instructions, and then you switch over to tower after you're done with your run-up, and they give you either clearances to hold short or to take off. And then once you've taken off and gotten up to pattern altitude, they switch you over to a departure control. In Camarillo, the departure control is provided by Point Mugu, the naval airbase, and they do have radar, and that's very helpful. And then after you leave the Point Mugu airspace to the northwest, they switch you over to Santa Barbara approach. And then as you get further north, closer to Santa Maria, you end up being switched over to LA Center. And so in this type of weather, you really need to look at the area forecast. And it looked like during the day, it was kind of switching between marginal VFR and IFR in certain airports, and then VFR for other airports. So in that case, if you're kind of seeing scattered and broken clouds, it's best to probably file IFR, because we're not going to be able to maintain VFR. VFR stands for Visual Flight Rules, and that's a set of rules that pilots follow when they're operating in good weather that's generally clear and allows pilots to see where they're going and maintain visual contact with the horizon. And so VFR pilots navigate and control their aircraft using visual references and not necessarily using inside the cockpit instruments. And you can do this by dead reckoning, and you don't really need to file an instrument flight plan. But in today's flight, the weather is kind of broken and overcast, so we elected to go ahead and file IFR, Instrument Flight Rules. And when you follow instrument flight rules, you rely more on instruments for navigation, and especially in poor weather conditions with reduced or instrument meteorological conditions. So we elected to go to Santa Maria. Santa Maria is a small town, Central Coast, California. It's in Santa Barbara County, and it's known for agricultural production of wine, grapes, strawberries, and it's also nearby the small coastal town of Oceano. And Oceano has been a subject of interest in the news lately. Oceano is known for its large dunes, sand dunes recreational area that is abuts the beach, and there's a lot of recreational vehicles there in Oceano. And on Monday, there was high surf warnings in all of San Luis and Ventura County, and they actually remain into effect today until 10 p.m. And millions of people have been affected by the high waves along the coastal area of Oregon and California. The last few days, the high tides were thought to be caused by warmer water temperatures and storm activity in the Pacific, which is associated with El Niño. And if you don't know, El Niño is a climate phenomenon that occurs in the Pacific Ocean and equatorial region where the temperature of the water is warmer, and it tends to happen in cycles every 2 to 7 years, and can cause high tides, as well as increased precipitation and rainfall, and particularly a lot of rain and snow in California in the Sierras. So the flight, pretty much went as planned. We're on approach here. I asked for the RNAV 30 approach into Santa Maria, and we were in and out of instrument meteorological conditions. You can see, and we did get a little bit of light precipitation on the windshield, and as a result of that, we did actually get to see some rainbows, and so that was interesting. And so this was all, I think, a very good example, an opportunity for a Young Eagle program member to see the difference between instrument flight rules on the way to Santa Maria, like we were following here, where we're relying on air traffic control to separate us and giving us clearances to fly through the clouds, versus after we landed at Santa Maria, we actually elected to depart via FAR, and I'll show you some footage of Oceano that we were able to obtain from the aircraft, showing some of the high tide effects on the coastal area of Oceano near the dunes recreational area. So here, we're on approach into Oceano and going in and out of the clouds. And it was actually a really beautiful day for flying. And, I spent a lot of time looking at the weather, kind of deciding what would be a good, safe place to take, passengers that I've never, been in my aircraft before, so I can give them a smooth ride, keep them comfortable, make sure, it's not too cold or too hot in the airplane. Interestingly, there were air mets for turbulence in this whole area, but we got pretty lucky, and there really was not a whole lot of turbulence. But especially when you're flying at the same level as the clouds, you oftentimes will get a little bit of light turbulence because there's different air temperatures above and below you, and the sunlight, shining on the clouds will heat up that air and can cause a temperature inversion. And if you don't know, the atmospheric temperature typically gets colder as you get higher, and so when it's warmer as you get higher, that's a temperature inversion. And so we're here just kind of descending on the approach into Santa Maria, and I had never actually flown into Santa Maria before, and so flying by instruments makes it a lot easier to find an airport and to know that you have terrain clearance when you're flying into a new airport, because the procedure is all laid out in front of you, graphically. So back to the Experimental Aircraft Association, EAA Young Eagles program. So people that are ages 8 through 17 are eligible to join the Young Eagles program. And there is a chapter at Camarillo Airport. And I would encourage you, if you have a young person that is interested in aviation, to go to youngeagles.org to look into, setting up an opportunity for mentorship and to learn about airplanes and air traffic control. And obviously there's a lot of industry jobs for people in aviation, manufacturing, aircraft mechanics, and most of the people who are members of the Experimental Aircraft Association build home-built airplanes, and they are able to build their own airplane. In order to be able to build your own airplane, you have to build at least 51% of the airplane. You can buy a quick build kit. I personally do not own a home built or experimental aircraft, but I think, for people who are mechanically inclined and technically inclined, it can be a group activity, and a lot of EAA chapters will allow young people to partake in building of a home-built airplane and learn how to rivet, pieces of metal together and build the wing spar and put in all the avionics and everything. And so that's a good opportunity for those kind of science, technology, engineering, and math type people. And I think that during the Young Eagles flights, it is especially helpful to involve the Young Eagle in the operation of the plane. For example, to make simple radio calls, or program the GPS, or operate the gear handle, and get them involved so they can get some real world experience and feel like they're participating in the flight. We were able to do that, and so that worked out very well. And so here we are going through one more cloud on our approach on the RNAV 30 into Santa Maria. And you can see here the final approach fix, Simcoe 2200. We were able to hit that on the glide path, and then we saw a rainbow on the approach, and that's always a good omen. And that was very interesting. This type of flight has been referred to as a $100 hamburger, which means you're just going to fly somewhere to get a hamburger, get something to eat, and the cost of the fuel in the airplane, adds up to a $100 hamburger. But due to inflation and rising, costs, a $100 hamburger has, increased to a $300 or a $500 hamburger. So we arrived on a Saturday afternoon in Santa Maria, not knowing if we would be able to go to a restaurant, one of a couple restaurants that are highly regarded at the Santa Maria airport. And it turned out that the restaurant was closed Saturday afternoon, and a lot of airport restaurants don't stay open except for lunch. And so that was not totally unexpected, and we didn't really have a reason to get out of the aircraft. So we went ahead and did a full stop taxi back, and then requested VFR departure to have a look at the coastal area of Oceano and see what, if any, effects of El Niño and the high tide had on the dune recreational area of Oceano. And so here we are coming into Santa Maria. We've got the airport in sight. It would be reasonable to cancel IFR at this time if needed, but we went ahead and landed 3-0. And one nice thing about going to a towered airport is that they will go ahead and close your IFR flight plan for you. So after we landed at Santa Maria, we departed to the north towards the Oceano dunes, and we surveyed the beach and the dune area for damage after the high tides. And you'll see that in just a minute here. And it's also important to note the differences between instrument flight rules and visual flight rules. So when you're flying by visual flight rules, it is the pilot's responsibility to be aware of airspaces and stay clear of, for example, the restricted areas such as R2516 north of Vandenberg airspace, and stay out of any class Delta without talking to the tower first, and be aware of the tops of the class Delta, and then be aware of the tops of the class Charlie in Santa Barbara, and be aware of the wildlife areas, staying, giving ample space. And also you have to do your own separation from other aircraft. And so there are airplanes that show up on the ADS-B receiver, but that can give you a false sense of reassurance because there may be people that are not required to have ADS-B receivers and transmitters, and so they won't show up, and you have to be looking outside the airplane, looking for other aircraft the whole time when you're flying by visual flight rules. And furthermore, in a day like this where there are clouds, I'm on the instrument flight plan right now, still on approach into Santa Maria, but we knew that the tops of the clouds were around like 10 to 11,000. So we knew that we'd be able to punch through a hole in the clouds and stay clear of the clouds. But if you don't know that already, if you haven't flown through this path of airspace, then you wouldn't really know if you're going to be able to maintain VFR. So that's important to know, that if you are flying VFR and you don't have an instrument rating, then you could be trapped on top of a cloud layer, and then you get yourself into trouble and you have to contact air traffic control. And as a VFR pilot, that can be very intimidating and frankly dangerous if you don't have an instrument rating. So it would be very difficult to do what we did today without an instrument rating safely. And so, if you don't know, the first step in obtaining a pilot's license takes about 40 hours, and you get a private pilot's license. And that really only is the first hurdle, the first step. And that's really a license to learn, because you're not a very qualified pilot when you just have a private pilot license without an instrument rating. And so it's an additional 50 hours or so usually to obtain the instrument rating. And then that allows you to file an instrument flight plan, and then you're allowed to fly by instrument flight rules. And so here we are landing at Santa Maria. We went over to the FBO. They appeared to be closed. The restaurant at the terminal was closed. And this is some footage of that we, we're kind of interested to see what damage there was at Oceano, because recently there's obviously been very high tides, and RVs have been pulled out onto the beach and it's been very dangerous during the high tides. So this was our flight path. You can see there's a little bit of light precipitation off our right wing, and then this is footage from Oceano during our flight, and you can see that there's still quite a lot of people and vehicles out on the beach, and there's still quite a bit of activity at recovering from the high tide. So then we turned back, flew VFR back to Camarillo, maintained our own cloud separation. You can ask for VFR flight following, and on a an availability basis, the air traffic controllers will grant VFR flight following, and they'll give you a squawk code, and they'll give you advisories on a as permitted with their workload. So you start out at LA Center and then Santa Barbara and then back to Point Mugu. And you can see we're kind of flying over Santa Barbara right here with Oxnard in the distance. So after we establish contact with Point Mugu approach, we request the RNAV 26 Zulu approach into Camarillo. We review all the approach fixes, get the ATIS, and begin to expect vectors. So the Point Mugu controller tells us to expect vectors and starts vectoring us over towards the final approach fix. And we know that O'Keefe's final approach fix minimum altitude is 2,800 feet. So we expect that the Point Mugu controller is going to vector us over and establish us on a pretty tight vector into the final approach fix. And so we kind of set up the GPS for that, load and activate the approach, and it's just a beautiful day out, and we're teaching the Young Eagles member here, all about flying here in the weather, in and out of the clouds, instrument flight rules, visual flight rules. And and his first question after we finally got out of the plane is, when can I start flying? And the answer to that is that in order to be eligible to hold a private pilot license, you must be 17 years old. So the common advice is that you can start working on logging hours when you're 16, and then you'll be able to take the check ride when you're 17. And you need to have at least a third class flight medical for that. And then you can follow with the instrument rating, which I would highly encourage anyone to pursue that after the private pilot license. And then in order to hold a commercial pilot's license, you must be 18 years old. So that means if you are able to earn up to log at least 250 hours, then by age 18, then you could take the check ride for the commercial license at 18. And then in order to hold a airline transport pilot license, the ATP, you would need to likely have 1,500 hours, depending on what kind of flight school you went to. Some of them it's 1,200, but for most pay-as-you-go flight schools where you're kind of funding your own education and it's not part of a standardized curriculum, it's 1,500 hours, and you would need to be 21 years old. So for somebody who's wanting to start working for the airlines, you would typically get hired with a regional airline, or possibly a cargo pilot job, and then eventually work your way up to a a big airline like Delta, United, American. Once those jobs open up, and you have to realize that pilots are forced to retire at age 65, and then only then are those jobs backfilled by the candidates with the highest number of hours. So it's really just a game of getting a certain quantity of hours to be eligible for those jobs for those people who are on that type of career track. I think it's important to recognize a kind of a common fallacy in that more hours makes you a better pilot. I don't think it's quite as simple as that. The higher number of hours just becomes a surrogate for what is assumed makes a better pilot, which is higher quality training, more diverse experiences, continuous learning, and better decision making, as well as simulation training. And I think it's pretty clear that if you just pull a banner up and down the beach for 40 hours a week, and you do that, for 50 weeks, that is not going to make you as good a pilot as looking at the weather for each hour that you fly and deciding, what are going to be the challenges of flying into this new airport, this new airspace that you've never been to, looking carefully at an instrument plate and going through the sequence, briefing yourself on an instrument procedure that you've never done before, and making good decisions about go, no go, because soundness of mind in high stakes decision making is what really makes a high quality pilot. So quantity is just a surrogate for what is believed to be higher quality training, but I think a good pilot is always learning and is always challenging themselves and flying a variety of different aircraft that have different limitations, different categories. I think you need to fly like a normal category airplane, a utility category airplane, an aerobatic airplane, high wing, low wing, single engine, multi-engine, fixed propeller, constant speed prop, and all of those experiences will make that higher time pilot be a better decision maker. And it's just kind of assumed that by the time you get to 1,500 hours, you will have some turboprop time and some turbine time and pressurized cabin time, and that you are going to be familiar with the concepts and the systems that are in airline transport category aircraft. But it's really up to the pilot, and particularly the low time pilot, to remain vigilant and competent, proficient, and to keep up on night landings and instrument proficiency, and doing more than just the minimum amount of flight reviews and instrument proficiency checks in order to be a safe pilot. Because the most important thing you can do is know when to say no, and to say like, okay, I don't think we're going to go today because the weight and balance is not right, the weather is not good, we're going to leave ourselves with not enough options to have an exit strategy. And so that's what you're really looking for in a high time pilot. You're looking for somebody that knows when to say no and can tell the owner, like, no, we're not going, and we need to think of another way. Leave tomorrow morning, because the credit card can save you. And not being unfamiliar a high-time pilot will not let themselves be unfamiliar with, a new kind of autopilot or a new kind of avionics that they haven't seen before. They read the book, they read the manual, and they become the expert so that they can master the operation in the aircraft. And it makes it look easy, but it's really not. It's not easy to be a high-time pilot, because you have to learn from your mistakes. Everybody makes mistakes, and you hope that those mistakes are small enough that they're survivable, and that you will live to see another day where you can tell a story. Gosh, I wish I wouldn't have done that, and then it would have been a smoother day. So anyway, that'll do it for this video. Look into the Experimental Aircraft Association Young Eagles program for young people who are interested in aviation careers. And I hope you enjoyed this video. Hopefully you learned something and it inspired you to pursue a career in aviation.